Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Bon Voyage Besties with your hosts, Rachel and Rosa. And today we're super excited to have a special guest with us, Melissa Byron. She's going to be chatting with us about risking it all in your 40s and moving abroad to Portugal. So we're super excited to have Melissa here. Originally, she is from the US, and Melissa has lived abroad since 2017. She also founded a Solo Woman Traveling, which is a travel blog and a tour curator focusing on slow, authentic travel experiences in Europe. So again, Melissa, thank you for being on the show. We're super excited to have you share the process of moving abroad and how we can go ahead and make that happen.
We really appreciate you being here. And we're so excited to hear all about moving abroad. Because I know for me, I always fantasize about moving abroad, but I'm kind of a big chicken when it actually comes to doing it. So we're super excited to hear your story.
So my best friend, she lives in Portugal, and she's always telling me, you and Michael need to quit your jobs and move here. And I'm like, although that sounds great, and maybe in the near future, I do not have any intentions, unfortunately, of quitting my job and moving to Portugal. So I am living vicariously through you, Melissa, right now. So we want to know what sparked you to make this move abroad.
Well, I can tell you what gave me the courage to do it was like traveling alone, and my love for traveling sparked this interest in moving abroad. And I thought it was just something you could only do if you had like lineage in another country, or you could, get an ancestral visa, or you married into the country, or you could get transferred for a job. So I kind of thought like, oh, this will never happen for me. And then on a solo trip many years ago, I was on a train with this woman who pretty much was just like, if you want to do something, like you can find a way and you can make this happen. And so I went back and really thought about that and started doing research on, is this really possible for me? And as you mentioned, in 2017, I actually did make the first move was to Germany, and then back to the US, and then to Greece, and then in 2023 moved to Lisbon, Portugal, where I am now.
That's amazing. And Lisbon is one of my favorite cities for traveling solo. I went, I think, 10 years ago. The time flies. And it was truly beautiful. So what a lovely place to live. I know a big part of moving abroad has to do with visas and the process of that. I work in education in New Jersey, so I'm used to paperwork and bureaucracy, but I know that the visa process can be overwhelming for some people. So do you mind sharing a bit about your experience with that?
Absolutely. So, there's two visas that someone from the US could likely get, the D7 or the D8. The D8 is a digital nomad visa, which a lot of people are getting these days. And then the D7 is like a passive income visa. So if you have pensions or dividends, or if you own a property in the US and you're getting rent from someone, that qualifies you to get the visa. So there's two different paths. And I will say, I hired a lawyer to help me, even though a lot of people DIY it. That's cool. It to me seemed like worth the investment, which was around 2,000 euros, to have someone help me make all these contacts to the authorities with all the paperwork that I needed. And honestly, it isn't that much stuff. It was just nice to have somebody to do the process with, because they also go with you to the appointment when you get your residency and whatnot. But you can DIY it, because a lot of people do.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And I agree. It's always like good to have a lawyer and to have that extra support, especially when moving overseas. Like it's a huge, huge deal. And I know, again, for me, because I've always dreamed about going abroad. There was a time when I was looking at international schools and I was like, this would be so cool just to hop from school to school. But I always psych myself out. So did you ever have any moments of fear or anxiety? And could you tell us a bit more about how you pushed through that? Because I could see where it would be intense.
I was at a point in my life, though, where it was like, well, I was 37 when I first did it. I'm 45 now. I was kind of at that, like, screw it. Like, let's just jump off the cliff. Because what did I have to lose, right? If it didn't work out, I could always go back to, America and get a job and whatnot. So it was more like, I was just in that mindset of like, if I don't try this now, when am I going to try it, right? Like, when am I going to go? That's where I was coming from when I made the first move.
It's amazing. Sometimes you just have to take that jump and you just have to do it.
Absolutely. Because again, what was waiting for me when I got back, if I wanted to go back, I knew how to do that. But what could be in front of me was just kind of like, well, why not? Why not try this?
Yeah, 1,000%.
So about how long was the entire process from the moment that you applied until you actually got the approval?
So I sent the paperwork in September, and then I got the approval, I think it was right after Thanksgiving. So it really wasn't all that long.
I personally obviously don't have an experience living abroad, but I hear Portugal is one of the easier countries when it comes to applying for the process and just the length of time that it takes, that it's a little bit much easier and smoother. So was that your experience when you were planning to move to Portugal versus Germany?
Absolutely. And if you have all of the qualifications to do it, you can feel good that it's just a matter of time before it'll happen. And it wasn't that long compared to Germany, where it's a different kind of visa. And this was in 2017, so maybe a lot has changed. I applied for a self-employment visa, so I had to come up with a business plan, and I had to do all these things. I had to get these letters of recommendation. And then I remember I applied in September, and I didn't get the approval until March of that year. And the way it works in Germany is you need to go there. So you have to risk it first, and you have to get an apartment, you have to register, you have to live there and not be able to basically work because you're not like really allowed to, you can't work there and wait for their approval. Where in Portugal, you do everything before. So they'll give you the visa before. So you'll apply for everything and then they will say you're approved. And then you can move over. So it felt like less of a risk doing it the Portugal way when going to Portugal versus when I did it for Germany.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And you've lived in many different countries, which is so super cool. I'm like living vicariously through you right now in my head. It's truly amazing. And I know another concern that travelers who may want to move overseas have is the eventual culture shock, because it always looks beautiful and seamless on social media, but culture shock can certainly happen and it can be quite stressful. So do you have any experience with culture shock and how you handled it?
Well, I mean, I can say it's definitely a little bit lonely when you do something like this. When you're moving to a country, maybe it's Germany, there is a lot of rules there. And if you're not from there and adapting to like the way that things were done, which is back then was a lot of paperwork. It wasn't as digital. I think they're working on that now. I think it's important to like start making that community right away to kind of help with, finding those other expats, those nomad communities, which there are plentiful now, so that it is looking a lot different from when I first did it. So that's my advice, is get right in the groups.
Yeah, absolutely. I do that when I travel solo anyway, even if it's for a short period of time. I just went to Quebec City and I used a Facebook group to get in touch with other solo travelers because I was staying at a hotel instead of a hostel, and it was just easier to make those connections. So did you find with finding those expat groups that Facebook was good for that, or are there other platforms that anyone moving abroad should consider?
I used Meetup when I first moved to Berlin, and I made an amazing group of girls through that organization. There was like a wine meetup. So that's how I met everyone.
Awesome. Meet over wine. And I love Meetup, even for home. I'm actually organizing, I'm not sure when this will go live, but it's close to Valentine's Day, and I'm having a Galentine's Day party this afternoon. And I would say like 80% of those girls I met on Meetup, and we're still friends. It's amazing.
I agree. And it really does make your experience.
Especially, not to age us, but it's hard to find those female friendships. So it's nice to have these type of platforms, especially like you said, when you're overseas living abroad, it can feel a little bit lonely. So kind of building that community and getting to know people, especially that they're going through the same experiences that you are, makes you feel a little bit less alone. So that kind of brings me to one of the things that you also share is your travel platform, A Solo Women Traveling, where you host different group trips for women, specifically around Europe. So can you tell us a little bit about that and how that got started?
Absolutely. So I love solo travel. That is how I kind of came out of my shell in life and everything. It really changed my whole life. And I encourage everyone to just take a small trip, even if it's just a few towns over. You don't have to go across the pond or anything like that crazy. Traveling alone gave me the confidence. But what I've learned on every trip is like, I really enjoy those moments of when I would meet someone. So whether that be on a walking tour or something else I joined, like a cooking class or whatever, those experiences are what really made the entire trip stand out to me. And here I am like living in another country with the expertise of certain places like Lisbon for one, and then Athens, since I did live there for a time, and then Germany to come. But those two places, Greece and Portugal, I lived in one and lived in the other. Why not create experiences to bring more people together? there's just so much room for this. And, as I get older and want community over anything else, over expensive things or anything, I want more experiences. So I decided to create a few trips a year where I would focus on more of slow travel style. So we're not like rushing to every single monument or museum, but we're really experiencing the location, like immersing into the culture and making friends for life. So
I love this. I know Rachel partakes in a lot of solo travel experiences. I kind of entered the solo travel game a little later in my life. But like you said, there's something so liberating and empowering about solo travel, but it can also be intimidating. I know for myself, the first time I took a solo trip, I wasn't necessarily by myself. I went to a travel conference. I was going to be with a group of people. So I think group travel is a great segue to lead to empowerment and to give you that confidence to kind of travel alone. So I love this so much.
Yeah, it's truly amazing. I know for me too, my very first solo trip was when I was 26 to Scotland. And my parents were sort of hesitant about the whole traveling alone thing because, like, gosh, that was in 2013. I'm aging myself here, but it wasn't quite as popular. So what I did was a group tour with this company, Haggis Adventures, and they really warmed up to that. They're like, this is perfect. You'll make friends. You'll make connections there. And I just did a talk with the Wonderful panel at the Travel and Adventure Show in New York. And this came up many times that if you're traveling alone and want to get out there, these group tours are a fantastic way of doing that. I love that you're providing this service. And I checked your Instagram and I also saw that you host trips in the summer. So as a teacher, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, because so many content creators just skip over summer. And I am so glad I could hopefully do one of your trips one day because I was like, well, yes, she has them in the summer too.
And so I'm going to have one in August to France.
I love France. France is so beautiful. I just love it. Do you have any group tour that you ran that like sticks out, like any great memories that you had since starting this company?
Well, the Greek island tour was just so incredible. It was in October, which is unfortunately right when the school year starts. Kind of the end of the season was kind of a risky time. I was like, but it was wonderful. The weather was wonderful. And the women, we made such a great connection, and it was from all over. It was really, really special.
Well, that sounds beautiful. I'm going to Greece this summer, so I'm looking forward to it. Yes, super excited. Athens and Crete.
Okay. And I'm going to be in Crete in June, so I think you're going a little later, so I can send you all the tips.
Please do. I would absolutely love that. It would make my day, and I know it would make my friends' days too.
Love Greece. I'm going to be living vicariously through both of you this year. I was like, is that in my bingo card to go to Greece this year? But you never know. Spontaneous little trip.
It's always fun being spontaneous for sure. So I love entrepreneurs. My parents, they were entrepreneurs themselves in a different field, not travel. But did you find there were any challenges with creating your business? Because I always get overwhelmed at the thought of creating a business, especially with tax implications. They kind of scare me.
A lot. As a U.S. citizen, I still continue my business was run through the U.S. And that's all possible and legal and all. Being an entrepreneur is an interesting journey. I do seem to find other entrepreneurs. I think we all find each other in a way. I really do. My father is also an entrepreneur, so I think that also runs in the families when you meet other people that have it in their blood. It just takes time and patience, and I make so many mistakes and then learn from it. And then, making the friends and the groups and, connecting with others, it's like makes you stronger as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know all about making mistakes. When my travel blog was earning more money before the Google updates, I was always so nervous about my taxes, and my parents, they work in taxation, and I would go running to them crying, like, what do I do? There's so much paperwork, and they would have to reassure me.
Keep those receipts. I mean, I do my own taxes, and like you said, it definitely gets complicated, and sometimes you're looking at different IRS regulations. So I can only imagine navigating that, living abroad, still having to file taxes in the U.S. As a U.S. citizen, it does get complicated. So it's always good if you are thinking of moving abroad or working abroad for a period of time to speak to a tax professional and see what kind of tax implication that involves, because it could also be a little bit costly too. So Melissa, I'm curious to know from you, what were some cultural shocks that you had once you moved to Portugal permanently?
I'm going to say one from Greece. Actually, it was kind of a cultural shock. There's two things that if you've never been to Greece, this is good for you to know, because it is quite shocking. In most places, you cannot flush the toilet paper down the toilet.
Yeah, signs everywhere.
Yeah. There's signs everywhere. It happens in Portugal. If you're in a really old building, you can pay attention to see, but it's not like as common as it is in Greece. And then something else when you're living in Greece, and you have an apartment, the water heaters need to be heated up 30 minutes before you take your shower. So you're not just like running home and just jumping in the shower. You're like, no, wait, I got to flip it on. I got to wait 20 minutes or so for the water to heat up and then go about my shower. And then you got to remember to turn it off after the shower. So it's just like there's like little things that, you just adjust to. And certainly in Germany, like I always joke about the paperwork, there's so many memes and whatnots about their paperwork and their stamps and handwritten everything. So there's all these things. You really start to appreciate how digitalized the processes are in the US. You're like, oh, I can just change my address online. That's great. Not in other countries. I went to the bank yesterday to change my address and they wanted all these paperwork, like my bank statements and from the US. I'm like, why? I just need to change my address. And now I have to go back and sign the form once it's ready. It's not just this simple, like, let me just change it. It's always a process, I've learned.
I can imagine. And I'm laughing at the bank because I would definitely struggle with that because I hate the DMV and I hate going to the bank. I had to deposit some bonds at the bank and I had been putting it off since September. I just deposited them 2 weeks ago. So I procrastinate very, very much with the bank. So I would definitely struggle.
Yeah, anything in person for me, same when it comes to paperwork or anything like that. If I can't do it online, I will prolong it as much as possible. But one of the things that I do love about Europe, at least when I go as a tourist, is that I feel like it's like a slower pace compared to back home, like in New Jersey and New York. So how have you adjusted to that kind of way of life?
Yeah, it's definitely been like a slow lean into that because I am kind of still wired to be working 24/7. And, it's just a slower process starting to like lean into like life here. It's spending time with family. You can see it. It's evident on the streets and people really enjoy their community. It really helps that I chose a place where the weather is nice most of the year. I mean, we'll have a little bit of rain and it's a little cold now, but, it's a practice almost. So something to strive towards, I would say.
No, definitely. I feel like it's a better work-life balance overseas. In the US, it's always like go, go, go. When I went to Croatia last year, so my good friend Michelle, she was born here in the States, but she moved to Portugal a few years back. And the two of us met up in Croatia. So we're walking around and it got to a point that she was like, Rosa, you need to like slow down. And I'm like, but I'm walking my normal speed. And she's like, no, I'm European now. We don't walk fast. We enjoy the scenery. We take everything in. So just like relax. We're not in New York anymore. And it took me a second to process that because she was right. We're so accustomed just going from point A to point B that sometimes we forget to kind of take in the scenery. So I definitely have a huge appreciation for that kind of slower pace. And I love how you incorporate the slow travel into your group trips because I think there's something special about being able to actually enjoy the destinations that you're visiting and not just checking off landmarks off the destination.
Exactly. My goal is to stay in a location a little longer so you're not changing hotels every other day, but you're taking day trips. So you're still experiencing the nearby places that you want to see, but you don't have to keep packing it up every couple days.
I love that.
I love that too. And it makes sense. A couple of years ago, my mom and we did a mother-daughter trip to Iceland and we just based ourselves in Reykjavik and did day trips out. And it was so nice to save all that time that we would have spent packing and shuffling to different hotels because it is time consuming and it can be a little stressful too if you have a train to catch and you're running late. I've been in that situation more times than I can count. I do think you can learn a lot with slow travel. So you're doing really good work.
Thank you.
Definitely. So what would be one of your biggest advice for someone who's thinking about moving abroad?
The biggest advice is get your ducks in order and understand all the processes. Reach out to people that have done it. When I first did it, I knew nobody that had done it. And that was the hardest part. Now I feel like there is so many people out there. Social media is really full of it. You can't not find somebody that hasn't moved abroad. And I think reaching out and just having an understanding from them, their process is gonna go a long way. It'll take a lot of like that stress off when you're going through it. So like anything else that's worth doing, it's not like super easy, but it shouldn't deter you if someone's like, well, it's a lot of work. Like, well, everything worth doing kind of can be that way. It's really worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said about it being a lot of work, but worth it. Today, everyone expects things instantly. And I think that has to do with like social media and attention spans and whatnot. but you shouldn't be deterred if you have to put in the effort towards a greater goal. And I think a lot of people need to hear that.
It looks easy, right? Like that's what social media makes it seem like, oh, they just woke up one day and they had everything they ever wanted and look at them traveling. I mean, I've been traveling Europe by myself and doing this since 2009. So I evolved over a very long time to create all of the things in my life that I have that I'm sure if you started following like yesterday, you might think like, oh, that seemed like it happened pretty quickly, but it does unravel over a decade or more.
I bet. And nobody, necessarily shares the downsides and the struggles that people go through when trying to make these moves. And also, too, I know from my friend, from her personal experience, it was a hard choice for her to make. Ultimately, now looking back, she loves living in Portugal and does not see herself moving back to the US anytime soon. But it was also difficult for her because she was leaving behind family and friends, but she decided to take the leap. And just like you said, Melissa, early in the episode, what do you have to lose? Worst case scenario, it doesn't work out, then you go and jump into something else. So having that kind of fearless mentality, I mean, it takes a lot to get there, but once you get there, it can be very rewarding.
Yeah, definitely something to admire for sure. Just take the leap and do it. You only live once, right? YOLO, YOLO. I look at my credit cards that way, so why not look at travel that way? YOLO, have fun.
So do you see yourself living in Portugal for the foreseeable future? Do you have any plans of maybe coming back to the States or moving somewhere else?
I don't have plans to go back to the United States. Anyone that knows me well knows that, I did. I went back in 21 when the world was in a weird place and I was like, I'm going to make it work. And I've done it. I've lived in some of the best cities I feel like America has to offer. And it isn't a knock against the country. It's just kind of like, I only live once and I've already done that. I've done it. I've seen it. Now I'm here and I really do enjoy Portugal a lot. The people are amazing and I love being part of the community and the country. So I do see myself here, though I've moved so many times. I've learned to just keep my mouth shut because I don't really know. If I say, yes, I'm here, I'm sure that in a couple months, it'll be a different story. So I'm just taking that part slow.
Very nice. I love Portugal. I've been there a few times. The food and the culture is amazing. My Portuguese is awful, but I, communicate. I speak Spanish, so sometimes I could understand. Worst comes to worst, sign language always works for me. Just pointing to what I'm trying to convey always works. But the people in Portugal, they're very friendly. They're
wonderful.
Yeah, I love Portugal. So it's funny, like I said earlier in the episode, my friend's always trying to convince me to move there. So who knows? Maybe 10, 15 years from now, I'll be there.
Yeah, always keep an open mind. You never know what's going to happen. And I love Portugal too. It was a beautiful solo trip. I definitely need to see more of it. And they were really sweet to me, even with the language barrier, because I speak a little French, Portuguese, no clue. But they were awesome about it. They were very understanding.
Yes, that is on my to-do list is to start classes because I'm starting to feel real terrible about the fact that I'm very little Portuguese. I did learn a little bit of German, like I could get by, I could understand the very basics. So I was there a whole lot longer, almost 4 years. I've technically been here a year. So it's time to get going. It's time to start learning that language. Greek, I was so intimidated. I didn't even know where to start. I'm like, it's not even a letter. That's a triangle. I don't even know what to do with this. Yeah, I learned a couple words, which I thought were fun. And the Greeks are the most amazing people too. I have such love for that country.
I have a friend who recently moved to Lisbon, well, about a year ago, and she's taking Portuguese classes. So she's always posting just to push herself out there, like on TikTok, videos of herself speaking. And I'm like, girl, power to you, because I have no idea how you managed to learn so much in such a small period of time. So it definitely takes some time, but I think, like you said, just to kind of incorporate yourself even more into the culture, it is good to know the language, or at least the basics.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So before we close out, do you have any last pieces of advice that you would like to give to our audience and share with the world?
Well, basically just to take that chance on yourself and see where it takes you. Honestly, I never saw this when I was younger. I never imagined that I would take these chances and live abroad on my own and, start a company. And it really took me by surprise. So if something's kind of pulling at you to take some kind of chance, just go for it. Don't put it away. And the worst thing you can say is, I'll do it next year. Just do it. Just find a way to put it in your calendar, or to open a bank account that says, I'm doing this. Every little step that you take can turn into that thing that you want to do.
That's awesome. And it's really true. So moral of the story, just do it. Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you so much, Melissa, for spending some time with us and talking all about your travels and your business. It's really inspiring. And I will continue to follow you. And hopefully one day I'll end up on one of your trips because they look amazing.
So you can follow Melissa on Instagram, it's Solo Women Traveling, and you can learn more about some of her amazing group trips. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them. We'll answer them as best as possible. And hopefully this episode inspire you to go ahead and be brave and take that leap. And who knows where in the world we'll find you next.
All right. Bon voyage, besties. We love you and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.